Hello and welcome back to AEF TV in association with Engerati. You can hear we're live at AEF because of the clanking in the background. But we're joined now in our studio by Ifey, who's a council member for the ECOWAS Regional Electricity Regulatory Authority. I was dreading having to say all of that. I managed it all in a sentence. Ifey, welcome to the studio. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
And we were talking a little bit off air, and one of the first interviews, by accident rather than design, set out sort of 5 megatrends within Africa, and every interview has kind of neatly fallen into one of those things, and one of those megatrends is regional interconnectivity within regions and the creation of that. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's happening in the ECOWAS region to achieve that?
Actually, the ECOWAS region is focused quite a great deal in facilitating interconnection among the 15 member states. The policy background behind this was the adoption of the energy protocol by the authorities of heads of states and governments of ECOWAS way back in 2003, where they signed a treaty that has helped shape our regional integration project to date. Some of the critical issues that were addressed in that treaty was the need to establish a West African power pool. And
so that's a trading pool?
Yes, it is supposed to be a trading pool. And of course, an ancillary of that, of course, was also to establish a regional regulatory authority, which is where I work, that would be the authority responsible for setting the ground rules for the operation or for the efficient operation of the power pool, and also to incentivize and attract investments into the ECOWAS region.
Yeah, so you used the word there, it's supposed to be a trading pool. Does that mean it's kind of
yes,
not yet in operation? You're still ironing out a few issues?
That is exactly so. It is not quite fully in operation. We do have a number of interconnections among the member states. But as I speak to you today, the level of cross-border trade in West Africa is still under 10%, which of course you will agree is really, really quite low and much below what the intentions of the integration project is all about. A major handicap, of course, that we've had in the region is the deficit of generation, because for you to have an efficient power pooling system, it presupposes that there ought to be at least sufficient generation, or in fact, indeed surplus generation, to allow the market players trade in this one pool. But we are coming from a deficit of at least, more than 50% of the power needs within the region, which makes it rather difficult to have a sustainable arrangement as at today. That is why I had used the word supposed.
Yeah.
But what we are trying to do at ERERA, and working closely with WAP, is to see how we can fast track the development of the ECOWAS regional electricity markets. So while we have been focusing on putting in place the right legal and regulatory framework that would aid investment into the sector, the West African Power Pool Secretariat, WAP itself, is also focused on certain infrastructure projects for which they have been seeking funding for, both from international donors and multilateral bodies. So there has been a lot of positive development in that area. So we are hoping that in the next few years we will have a proper power pool when we have at least been able to, at least if not meet, at least if not exceed our generation need, we should at least be able to closely meet it to allow for more viable trading within the region.
Because you, in everything you've got said, you've got a number of chicken and egg scenarios, haven't you? You've got you've got to create all the interconnections first, but then you quite rightly you've said, well, actually, there is not enough capacity, so no one's going to trade stuff they need themselves. That's just the nature of trading things, and so where is the solution? Do you think that the physical joints need to be in place first, and that will make it attractive for the generation to come in, or is it we need to do almost everything in parallel?
Our approach has actually been more of a gradual approach to putting in place the right structures. Yes, ideally we need to have generation surplus, but like I said to you, even with the deficit we have today, there are a number of arrangements in place that have facilitated some form of cross-border trading. So even countries that do not have sufficient power are still exporting power to neighboring countries to help them solve their own energy needs. We do not think that that is sustainable in the long run. That is why I say that what we're trying to do is to move towards the present scenario to helping to put in place the kind of framework that will attract further investments into the sector. Yes, it's a chicken and egg scenario, quite all right, but we are working together. So we're not saying, oh, that we need to have those interconnections in place first.
Understood,
before doing the generation. Yeah. We are doing generation country by country basis. We're also promoting interconnection across the region so that as soon as we have sufficient generation, people would readily have in place the transmission infrastructure that is required to wheel power from one country to the other.
Because I would imagine, I mean, one of the other things which, let's go from the viewpoint that all of this is going to happen, the interconnection is going to happen, and I think that's a fair viewpoint to take. But then you are also in a position to create quite a sort of sustainable energy framework, because I would imagine there are member countries where hydro is a good option, there are other member countries where solar is a good option, and all of that can then start working together.
Exactly.
And it's quite a powerful tool set as well.
Yes. You're quite right, because I must also mention that in addition to WAP and ERERA, there's also an ECOWAS Center for renewable energy and energy efficiency. This is also a body that has been created to help facilitate the development of renewable energy resources within the region. I'm sure that you are aware that at least West Africa is blessed with enormous renewable energy potentials. We have potentials for solar, because like we have summer all year round in West Africa. We have huge potentials for hydro, largely unutilized today because we probably have utilized just about 20% of the hydro resources within the region. We have huge potentials again for wind energy and all of that. So the approach is not just focusing only on the regional interconnections. There's also another approach which is trying to encourage off-grid systems, which is where the renewable energy center comes into play. And this beyond the whole focus on encouraging alternative sources of energy, we're also focusing on even energy conservation, because what we have realized in the region is that even with the huge deficit, there's still a lot of wastages.
Yes.
So issues of how do you manage your resources more efficiently comes in. How do you ensure that you have in place the kind of fittings and all of that that will ensure that you use less energy comes in. So to that extent as well, what ECOWAS has done is to put in place a policy that encourages every member state to ensure that by the year 2020, that up to at least 20% of the energy mix comes from the renewable sector. And for us at ERERA, what we've also been doing in the last couple of years is to assist the member states regulators put in place the right framework for regulation of renewable energy. So issues like the tariff structure, issues like how to ensure that you have in place the most cost-effective sources of renewable energy are things that we've been holding discussions with them in. So we're looking at the big projects that will go on the interconnected regional pool. We're also looking at smaller projects that would help fast-track access to power in the region.
And these projects on the sort of renewable side and things like that, are they kind of looking to solve some of the community energy issues and things like that? Is that what you're talking about? Because I'm interested in you say that they're like off-grid projects.
Certainly.
Yeah,
That is quite right, really, because most of our population in the region still reside in the rural areas. We've looked at the cost of grid extension. Sometimes, in fact, most times, and it does make sense, and even has more cost benefit to put in place little off-grid systems, rather than trying to extend the grid from, say, these urban areas to the rural areas. And again, we've also found that it is actually much easier to put in place a smaller project. So if you want to do like a 2 megawatt or a 5 megawatt plant, it's much easier to realize that, say, within a couple of years than hoping to find funding for 200, 300, 1,000 megawatt projects, which for us still remains a bit of a problem in the region because, of course, we have issues of trying to get bankable projects and all of that. So yes, we are focusing on having those little community projects, which could actually be managed by the communities themselves, because it's not just a question of putting those projects in place. We're also trying to find some kind of project arrangements that would enable ownership of those little projects by the communities themselves. Cape Verde, for instance, which is a member state of ECOWAS, I know it's an island and all that, but we have realized that that is one country that has the most access to electricity in the West African region. It is a small country, by the way, but they rely mostly on renewable sources, wind and solar,
Right.
and theirs is a success story. So we are hoping that we can replicate that model in other member states.
Can I just, because we're coming to the end of our time in the studio here.
Yes.
If I may, I'd just like to dig into that just a little bit, because it's one of those fascinating topics where, and you said it yourself, the big grand plan is going to take years.
Yes.
The need on the ground is now.
Exactly.
So there is a fix, which is this community energy thing. Just to give you a bit of an opportunity to showcase that success. What was the model? Was the generation system community owned, or was it part funded? And can you talk a little bit about that?
No, actually, it was most of their projects actually part funded by the government as opposed to the community. But let us also realize that prior to that, most of their power plants were actually diesel fired, which in itself is a very expensive and, of course, not a very clean sort of energy and all of that. So we have always been of the view that for most of our countries where there's a lot of reliance on either light crude or diesel-fired plants, which are expensive, which are not clean and all of that, you might begin to look at that alternative of renewable sources, solar, wind, and maybe the small hydro systems as well. So it is a model that has worked for them. They do not have as much community engagement as you might want to have, but I think that moving ahead, trying to actually get some bit of community ownership as well is also another model that can help free the government from having to contribute so much again.
And I suppose sometimes the proof is, and we are coming to the end of the proof is in the delivery. And I suppose if you can show that and say, look, here's what can be done, and here's what could be done if you as a community get behind it, then that'll be.
You are quite right. You are quite right, really, because I know even in the Gambia as well, there's a project that they've also had this kind of community engagement, and it has been quite successful, really. Because the project company came up, did all of that, then delivered to the community. It created jobs as well, because they had a few young men who are responsible essentially for managing all of that. And because you have that ownership thing over it, people are quite prepared to pay what they need to pay. There's peer pressure on people to make sure that they do not default in paying for power. There is no issue of vandalization of the project itself, because everybody is looking out to ensure that it's working very well. So it is a win-win solution, really, for at least extending power, especially to the rural communities.
On that note, we are going to have to stop it, because we are at the end. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, same here. Thank you.
And just for you watching as well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. There are many more on the site as well. You can see some of the conversations that have happened here at Africa Energy Forum. And thank you for watching it. Thank you again for joining us.
All right, then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, then.